So far on this channel, we've beat Caves of Cud with some of the weakest creatures in the game. So I thought, naively, that it might be fun to take on the game as one of the strongest creatures. And that is, of course, the king of the Girsh Nephilim, the star-formed Ealkadon. And, as a bonus challenge that I sincerely regret imposing upon myself, we'll also be hunting down all the other Girsh Nephilim and see if we can encounter ourselves for an in-game boss showdown. If you're new to the game, well, I'll try to explain as best I can what's going on, but things get a little out of hand later. But for now, let's get started. The starting character doesn't matter, as we instantly just spawn and swap into our Girsh. We start at level 60 and the stats are of course insane. I'll talk more in detail about how it works later, but seeing as how this boss only appears after defeating all the others, we naturally already have all the benefits from the other Girsh Nephilim, extra arms, extra health, and a bunch of other good stuff. On top of that, we have even more arms with the multiple arms mutation, wings which grant high-level flight, regeneration, and night vision. We also have Omniphase and reflective shielding, and some other abilities I'll get to soon. There are a couple of other surprises here for me, such as the fact that we lay egg sacs every few turns. You slough a prism creche, the game says. Sounds pretty, doesn't it? It's a term I've come to despise. In actuality, it's just a pretentious way to say you crap out an egg sac, and that sac bursts into a pack of Girshlings a few turns later. These Girsh babies will attack anything, even friendly NPCs. They're not super strong, but they can quickly outnumber and cause chaos, and as far as I can tell, there's no way to disable their spawns. First, I head into the village and slowly make my way around. I have to stop every few steps to destroy my own egg sacs. The villagers are also hostile towards the sacs themselves, but one too many wrong steps and the situation could turn very bad, as I only have a few turns to take it out before the sac bursts. I could, in fact, skip taking the village quest by picking up the data disk at the Joppa Ruins, but completing the quest here also provides us with a recoiler, which could be useful. I also need to talk to the village leader, as I'll need the make camp ability, the only reason I took Desert Canyon as my starting village. Outside of villages, we should have no problem frolicking through the fields of Cud, but for any areas where we need to keep NPCs alive, it'll be this tedious, literal step-by-step gameplay. It just shows how strong this character is if our main problem already is that we can't not kill things just by walking around. These villagers also speak my favorite dialect, where everyone talks like this. Interestingly, one of our quests reveals the location of a goatfolk village. I decide to head there first to hopefully stock up on some trade goods for water, and it pays off. The goats pose no threat, and they drop tons of carbide gear. There is another surprise though, and that is I can't equip any weapons or armor. Seeing as how all of our limbs that count as natural weapons show as gigantic in the tooltip, I'm assuming I can only equip gigantic gear. Makes sense, but seeing as how gigantic gear is pretty rare, it looks like we won't be gearing up for this run. Oh well, who needs gear when you're a Girsh Nephilim? I also run into my first Esper hunter here, because with such high ego and mutation levels, we do have a bit of psychic glimmer. However, since almost all of our mutations are physical, these guys are little more than test dummies. I finish the quest off easily and head back to the starting village to collect my rewards, which include the data disk. From here, I decide to head through the desert towards the 6-day stilt, though I do stop when I see a pack of Izakari raiders to test out that ability that's been teasing me from the hotbar, the Aristual Beam. If you fought any Nephilim before, you already know how this works, but basically it fires a series of rainbow death beams. 3 volleys are fired over a few turns, and it would seem there's at least one turn between each firing where the enemy may have a chance to attack, though I think quickness and move speeds are included in that calculation. I can't control where the beams go, but anything caught within them is going to have a bad time. Any Girsh babies caught in a beam's path will actually refract it, causing even more chaos. Using the beam does leave us in a weakened state, giving the Callow effect, but this only lasts for a couple of turns, and our stats are so high that I don't think it really matters much anyway. When I run into a legendary bear a few screens later, I decide to try our other signature skill, Quantum Fugue, and, well, it's definitely overkill. So yeah, this character is arguably a little ridiculous. There are some trade-offs, however. Unlike in our low stat runs, we have the stat requirements to purchase any skill we would ever want. The problem this time is actually getting the skill points. Because we're already at level 60, we've missed out on as many levels worth of points. Gaining XP is very slow at this level, and skill points don't really scale with levels, so even if we were to level up, we wouldn't suddenly get enough points to buy everything we need. This is the reason that I opted to learn the Make Camp ability from the starting village, as we wouldn't be able to buy it for lack of points. We start with 2 other skills by default, but it's not much, and even though we're already OP, it feels like there's at least one skill we absolutely need: multi-weapon fighting. Or at least, I thought we did. I started doing the Baylaw quest up to the point where I need to talk to Nillihind. As usual with these runs, wardens hate me, so I started looking around for love tonics until I decided that Wandering Mechanimists are a more reliable resource, as they can give rep, which I can use to learn Proselytize at the Stilt. After finding the first Mechanimist, I looked a little more at my stats, and it turns out that the other 3 Spotted Claws have a 100% chance for an offhand attack. I guess I just hadn't noticed because everything has been dying in one hit just from the first claw. The multi-weapon fighting skills would, however, benefit my Starprint Hooves, cudgels that do umbral damage, which basically means they just ignore AV. I consider stopping, but since I'm already halfway done and the Proselytize skill might be useful, I continue the quest. I head to the Stilt, stopping to talk to Sheba, the giant dragonfly, to turn in my books for a pittance of XP. I water bond with old Eshelstad and learn Proselytize. With our stats, it should be effective against pretty much everyone. Then it's back to Baylaw. I'm really not the biggest fan of this quest, especially now that I have to deal with egg sacs because you have to walk around the entire village, examining things and talking to NPCs. Once I finally go through all that mess, I can water bond with Eshkind, but I'm still 50 rep points short of learning the skill. A little bit of deja vu here. At least we have Proselytize to show for all that effort. I realized later that I was still thinking in terms of a normal run at this point. Man, if I only knew what was coming, I would have done things much differently. For now, progressing our build is not really an option, though possible anything we might want to do, like finding gigantic gear or leveling up, would be slow and honestly not really necessary. There's no reason not to just crack on with the run. I head to Gritgate first, and of course the Barathromites are hostile, but I can at least proselytize Maffeo and buy the Recoiler. I'm a little concerned when I try to use the Recoiler I got from the starting village to quickly head back, and it doesn't work. I didn't think much of it at the time, but this could potentially make the run much more difficult. Anyway, I head to Golgotha, break in, and drop down without worrying at all about the fall damage. I decide to use Temporal Fugue for some overkill fun on Slog. Doing this here turns out to be a huge mistake. As pretty as the rainbow laser beams are, the novelty kind of wears off on me here. As Slog dies in the first round, then I have to spend time waiting for all the clones to fire all their beams for what feels like 5 minutes straight until they all dissipate. They've also destroyed all the nearby way droids, so as I'm looking around for any that hopefully survived, as they're a quest item that I'm pretty sure we need to progress, I accidentally fall into the cloaca hole. Now I do need to go through here eventually, but I want to make sure my recoilers work before I head too deep, and sure enough, they don't. So I have to wander around the underground looking for stairs up. This is more annoying than anything. For the first time ever in this game, I enable the settings option to automatically attack enemies that get close while auto-exploring. In normal playthroughs, this can be a death sentence, but here it's practically necessary. The biggest issue, though, is that most of the Girsh Nephilim reside 40 or so strata underground. There are pits that lead down to them, but finding stairs leading back up is at the mercy of RNG. And considering how much effort it's taking just to find my way back up from only 5 strata down, that is definitely not something that I want to deal with later when we go hunting for them. It's frustrating that my recoilers aren't working. Immediately more concerning is the fact that, indeed, it seems that all the way droids were destroyed. As far as I know, this is the only location in which they spawn. If they do appear as random loot, which I'm not sure I've ever seen, it could potentially take hours to find. Now, you can hate me if you want to, but I decide to just wish one in. If I had all the time in the world, I would probably just reset the run, but unfortunately, I don't. As much as I'd like instead to come up with interesting solutions, it doesn't look like there are any reasonable ones here. I simply can't progress the main storyline without this item. I do have to wind my way back up through the underground caves again, which I personally consider more than a fair trade for making a small mistake-correcting wish. We're not out of the woods just yet. Back at Gritgate, I have to carefully navigate through the Barathramite's onslaught of laser fire. Now, despite what they may have you believe, the Barathromites are incredibly stupid and will kill each other via friendly fire with no hesitation. My reflective shielding doesn't help them either. Honestly, the more Barathromites that die, the better, as there will be less friendly fire that could potentially take out Otho. They won't talk to me unless proselytized, after which they're more than willing to stop and converse amidst the gunfire. I also use some rep to learn Tinker 1 from Otho, as we probably can't learn it otherwise. So let's talk about that recoiler problem. The Yalkadon, like all the Nephilim, has the passive effect Reflective Shielding. Among other, mostly beneficial effects, this prevents us from using some powered equipment such as recoilers. Finding your way back up from only a few strata down is possible but can be annoying. But since we plan on going deep, climbing back up to the surface from 40 strata down can be incredibly time consuming. And recoilers save time in general, which, after all the messing about I've done so far, would just be really nice. I can temporarily disable the reflective shield by getting caught in an EMP explosion, so I can drop my recoiler on the ground, move a few tiles away, detonate the EMP from my inventory so that it hits me but not the recoiler, pick the recoiler back up, and as long as I use it before the EMP effect wears off, it should work. I do have to be mindful of the grenade's range and duration. The Mark I EMP has a range of 2 and a possible effect duration of 5 to 6 turns. That means after detonating from 2 tiles away, I use 2 turns to move through the recoiler, and 1 turn to pick it up, leaving 2 to 3 turns left to use it. Plenty of time. We just need the grenades now. I decide to head over to Ezra. I want to use their oven for the psychometry meal to learn how to craft EMP grenades, as I think that's what will make recoiling possible. Unfortunately, I can't alter space-time through my local normality lattice. Hate when that happens. This is, of course, a side effect of the reflective shielding. I'm hoping that something like normality gas can overcome this, but if not, I instead need to find the blueprint for one of the EMP grenades, or just find a bunch of EMP grenades. For a run that was supposed to be easy, this one sure is throwing roadblock after roadblock my way. I decide to check the stilt first. As always, the egg sacs are very annoying, but I do find a schematics drafter. They don't have anything useful, but I do proselytize and relocate them. I always like to check Ichor merchants, not only for their precious liquids, but because they often have engraved or painted containers that have the location of historic sites. And here it pays off, as I find the location of 2 on 1 merchant. We may not need to go to them, but it's nice to know their location just in case. Sadly, no other drafters or grenadiers, so it looks like we will be headed to those historic sites, as the loot I need is somewhat common there. I head to the closest site, and there's not much to speak of. The relic actually isn't bad for 99% of other playthroughs, but useless for us. As for the second location, there are trash monks and hermits here, both who drop really good gear. I find a normality gas pump right away, but it's not gigantic, so we can't use it. This is probably for the best, as I later learned that our Girsh here actually repels nearby gases. I find a lot of good gear here, but again, it's all useless. The relic here gives Temporal Fugue, and it's a glow sphere, which we can equip despite not being gigantic. This could be insane on top of our Quantum Fugue, but I'll save that for later. I head back to talk to the schematics drafter, kind of a long shot at this point, and of course, they also don't have anything. It is quite possibly the most frustrating thing in Caves of Cud, particularly in challenge runs, to be progression locked by a single RNG loot item. High tier loot has the issue of being rare, while low tier loot has a diluted pool. I decide to just vendor farm our single schematics drafter. A grenadier would make this process simple, but that's not the cards we were dealt on this run. I could also do cloning and all that nonsense, but I really don't feel like it. I'd like to keep the cheese to a minimum for this run. While I'm doing that, let's talk about another possible strat I could use. Spiral borers might seem like an obvious choice, as they dig straight down 20 strata and can easily be found on roaming Templar packs. The problem is that at least one of the Nephilim lairs is not a straight dig down job. Yes, we could get close, but as shown, underground navigation is extremely annoying, and trust me, it only gets worse the lower you go, even with a god character. Eventually, I do find an EMP Mark I data disk, which only requires Tinker 1. Unfortunately, my joy is short-lived as I go to learn them and realize that Otho teaches the base tinkering skill, not Tinkering 1 itself. That doesn't completely ruin everything, but man am I failing hard this run. In my efforts to save time, I've wasted hours. Random villages could potentially teach me Tinker 1, but the chance is low. Though it would be nice to craft my own, all I should really need is a handful of EMP grenades. Common enough, especially if I progress the main quest. I already have 2 nades, which should be enough to get started. I make a base near the middle of the map. I use my quantum clones to clear the land, as the beams are pretty good for clearing out walls. I'm mostly just storing loot that I found at our second historic site on the off chance I find a way to break them down for scrap. It occurs to me that I can use an EMP grenade to lower my shields and learn the recipe, in case I can ever learn Tinkering 1, so I use a Mark III to do just that. For now, I think the best thing to do is just grind out the main quest. Shouldn't take too long, and I can look for EMP grenades as I go. To that end, I stop at a few ruined pop-ups on the way, as well as stop by Kakukya to see if Nuntu has the location of a legendary grenadier, but alas. Next stop is Bethesda Susa. I obliterate the first floor with Quantum Fugue, but realize that might destroy chests and anything in them, or even quest items, and we don't want a repeat of Golgotha. So I decide that was enough for now. Overall, this was a pretty nice time. All the trolls die in one hit. I had to break into the phase spider's lair as I don't have a gigantic pickaxe, and the phase silk didn't help, I'm guessing because I'm already omniphased. I killed everyone at the temple looking for EMPs, and though I didn't find any, I did find some interesting items. First, a gigantic short bow, which can be loaded with regular-sized arrows. It does relatively no damage, but I still equip it because why not? Then a gigantic energy cell, which can be slotted into regular-sized items and has twice the energy capacity. Nice. For probably the first time ever, I backtracked my way out of the Susa to conserve my 1 EMP grenade. Back at Gritgate, the bears are as hostile as ever, but I'm soon able to get to the next quest. I don't waste any time getting to Ezra and killing Asphodel, who is surprisingly tanky, so I finish them off with a Rainbow Death Beam. Whilst here, I check in with Sixshrew and Yula, neither of which have EMPs, but I'm hoping the next quest might yield a few. I return to Gritgate, and Otho is hanging out in the zone just south of town. He must have followed me in combat from earlier. I proselytize him and start the next quest, which strangely makes the screen rumble, even though we're outside. I don't think much of it and head back inside. The problems start when trying to progress this quest. My first sign of trouble is that the radar wasn't showing the Templar's spawn location. I wait around and the raid never comes. I wasn't going to use any of the defenses, but I thought maybe that might make a difference. But after spending all of the amperage I could, still nothing. I wander around thinking maybe stepping in the right tile could trigger it, but nothing. In doing so, I get careless and let my Girsh babies spawn all over the place, and several Barathramite casualties are incurred, including Otho. Guess I'll deal with that later. For almost 10 minutes, I'm completely stumped. Thinking the game was bugged, I was about to bring up the wish menu to commit another infraction, when I remembered the weird screen shaking from outside. So I stepped south back into that zone and walked around a bit, and sure enough, the raid party spawned in that zone, not Gritgate itself. Now this has some pretty interesting implications that I'll definitely have to look into for future runs. For now I just clean up, and sadly there are no EMPs left over from the battle. The bigger problem now is that there is no Otho left over from the battle either. He died, but he has the life loop, so he's actually respawned in Barathram's study, but for whatever reason, he's not coming out. Maybe it's because the zone's frozen, or something, but I can't get down there as I don't have the key. I try a Skulk Injector for burrowing claws, but even with pre-release content enabled, it seems you can't use the dig up or down abilities with the Injector version. I can, however, go down the top right stairs that normally lead deep under Gritgate, as it passes through the same zone as Barathram's study. There's a thick sheet of stone walls to get through, but I can use the Skulk Injector's enhanced digging to quickly break through. Or at least it would be quick if I didn't have to stop after every 2 tiles to clean up these damn egg sacs, but I eventually get through, and sure enough, I see Otho, as well as Q-Girl, who both would have otherwise perished if not for their life loops. I can now talk to them, after which we need to pass time for the next stage of the quest. So I go and check on the Ezra vendors again, who I've since relocated. Strangely, Sixshrew was hostile at first, but after the first proselytization was permanently friendly. I also stop in Yid Freehold, everyone is of course hostile, so I skirt around the outside and sneakily proselytize Tilly, and relocate her just outside of town. She doesn't have much to help, but does have a Zetachrome hammer, which we'll need for the golem later. After a quick stop at the base to dump all the junk that's been piling up in my inventory, I head back to Gritgate for the next step. Even though literally everyone is dead, Otho notes that it was a remarkable lack of destruction. True, nothing of value was lost. The next quest is pretty simple: head to Rainbow Wood and meet with Pax Clank. Now, if you had a really low ego stat and forgot that love injectors existed, you might have to do some crazy strat like dominating a will sap to lower Pax's willpower to a point where you can persuade them. However, we just proselytize here. It still takes a few tries, but we can now talk to them and progress the questline. One final dungeon before the ostensible fun begins. It's everyone's favorite, the Tomb of the Eaters. I'm really only worried about one particular thing here, which causes me grief almost every run. First, we break into the tomb, allowing us to bypass applying the tattoo for now, which lets us bypass the door, and not have to deal with the recall bell. It's a rather uneventful trip up the tomb. I fight the cherubim for fun, and although they're the strongest enemies we've encountered so far, they can't even damage me. One, however, does get a good shot in and dismembers my hand. This is actually quite handy, as I'll need a limb for later, and with our regeneration mutation, we grow it back instantly. Before we can enter the tomb, we need to tattoo ourselves, so I bring up my inventory for the moment of truth, and yes, we can in fact tattoo ourselves, unlike when playing as some creatures. If not, we'd probably not be able to continue. You can engrave an equipped pair of helping hands, but I don't think that would have worked here, as they need to be gigantic for us to equip them, and good luck finding a set of gigantic helping hands. However, there's a new problem. Being a colossal creature, for the same reason that we can't equip normal gear, the Alcadon is too large to enter the sarcophagus. It's always something with this game, I swear. At first, this seems pretty dire. We know from previous runs that making a dominated creature enter the tomb doesn't work. Not that learning domination is a great option anyway. I do have a few more ideas, so I make a backup save here and start experimenting. My first idea is to use one of the blueprint morphing recipes. There are 2 recipes in the game that you can learn from NPCs that, when eaten, will permanently and radically change your body. One of these is the Cloaca Surprise. This is given by Slog, and it basically transforms you into Slog. But since Slog passed away during the Waydroid incident, that's no longer an option. Man, using those clones there really was a bad idea, wasn't it? The other option is the Crystal Delight. This is taught by an NPC named Thicksalt, but this has its own problems. Due to the weird way that Faction Rep works when swapped, I can't get Thicksalt to talk to me, even if I were to get my reputation extremely high. Usually I just bypass this weirdness with proselytize, but there are a few types of NPCs that can't be persuaded at all. This is pretty rare, but the crystalline entities of Chava, including Thicksalt, are not valid targets for proselytize. I also tried Beguile and Dominate, which even if we could get, don't work either. So what about that Slog idea? I did some testing, and oddly, it seems that even if we eat the Cloaca Surprise, we retain our Colossal status. Slog itself is not gigantic, and interestingly can fit in the tomb, but I imagine that if we retain our gigantism here, we'd also retain it with the Crystal Delight. We know from previous runs that domination wouldn't work, as the game prevents dominated followers from entering, unless of course they were perma-dominated. Yes, there are a few less conventional ways to get mutations, as you'll see later, but the issue is they won't help us. One thing that did work was Warm Static. Dropping 1 gram of Warm Static on ourselves completely changes us into a random creature. Here, in testing, I turn into a bear, and the game will indeed let me enter the tomb. But we'd really have no way to turn back into the Ealcadon, which brings us to the biggest issue with all of these potential bypasses: we lose our identity. We would lose our body plan, levels, and/or mutations depending on the method. And while something like that is totally in line with any normal CUD playthrough, it's not so much the spirit of these challenge runs. Like, if I wanted to be a bear, I'd play as one from the beginning, not halfway through. Maybe you disagree, and that's okay, but none of these options felt quite right, so I simply used the Thin World Wish to progress us to the next stage of the quest as a last resort. So that's 2 wishes so far, but the first one wasn't necessary, I just didn't want to restart. So unless there's some way to get past this part that I didn't think of, entirely possible, this is the only wish required to beat the game. Hopefully. It's funny how when you enter the sarcophagus, it says the colossal lid slams shut, even though colossal creatures can't enter. At least the Girsh Rainbow Trails effect looks really cool in the Thin World. So, back to Gridgate for quest progression. It's very annoying to talk to Barathrum or Pax, as I have to proselytize them to do so, and once I do, they start fighting with each other. I considered putting off the Golem until later, but I might as well get it out of the way. Since the Golem is something that I don't care about at all for this run, I just grab whatever ingredients for it. The hardest part is the power source. I don't think that Chiva will be an option, so I have to farm Neutron Flux from our only Ichor merchant. But after a few rounds, I'm already sick of dealing with the Girsh babies every time, so I came up with a solution. I've noticed that once you reach a certain number of babies, the egg sacs no longer spawn. My idea was to reach that limit and trap all of them in a walled-off area. I could do this with portable walls, but my simpler solution was to find a ruin that was already mostly closed in. I find one quickly and just grab a large boulder from the surface of Bethesda Susa to block off the only entrance, careful to kill any sacs before they hatch until this step was done. Then I just ran back and forth inside until no more sacs spawned. Simply head up to the world map to escape, then re-enter, and success. The babies are trapped inside, and no more will spawn as I move around, leaving the outside area safe to bring NPCs. I move the Ichor merchant here as well as Yala and Sixshrew, which pays off as I get at least one EMP grenade. After farming 2 drams of flux, I decide to just head to the Alchemist in the Susa for the last one. They always spawn with 1 of every precious liquid in the game. Somehow this guy had 2 drams of flux though. I take both. I need a follower for the Golem, so I head near the lake and grab the first level 30 IC, this time a Reef Hermit. As usual, Gritgate is a logistical nightmare. This time I have to juggle 3 NPCs, plus the fact that I can't even interact with the Golem Mound while a hostile is nearby. However, here I realized something. When you proselytize, you can direct a follower to not attack except in defense. They will continue to obey this once dismissed, even if they are still hostile. Possible oversight? Maybe, but this is actually game-changing and would have saved me a lot of headache if I'd realized it earlier, not only in this run, but pretty much every other. Pax perished during all of this fun, but he respawns after a few days and doesn't even need a life loop. I also had to get a new Reef Hermit because of reasons. But of course, there's one final issue. Apparently, my follower has to be currently following me to be counted as a valid body for the Golem. Who knew? The problem is, with proselytize, you can only recruit 1 follower at a time, and I need to proselytize Pax to even speak with him to build the Golem. But if I do that, the Reef Hermit is no longer my follower. Just Love Injector Pax, you may think. Well, I can't equip a Love Injector in my hands because it needs to be gigantic. When I tried to use it from the menu, which I don't think would have worked anyway, I realized a new problem. I can't reach them with the injector, as I'm flying. Weird that I'm flying underground, right? Turns out I can't stop my flight. Hitting the ability toggle button does nothing. Swooping many turns in a row to try to fall? Nothing. Removing my wings mutation via wishing? Nothing. Explicitly removing the flying effect via wishing. It removes the text from the on-screen window, but my character remains in flight. The more astute viewer may have realized this has been going on since after using the Tomb of Eater's Wish. I guess it's somehow permanently locked in our flying state? It looks like we'll just have to accept this. It doesn't make a huge difference really, so long as it doesn't cause any issues later. Back to the problem at hand, it looks like we need 2 followers. A dart gun might allow us to inject one of them, but it would also need to be gigantic for us to use. So instead, we're just going to beguile. So I head to Kakukya, proselytize Nuntu, and take him to a safe place, and... of course, I don't have enough reputation to learn cooking and gathering, the skill necessary to allow us to use beguiling. At first, I thought I might have to wander around looking for legendaries and villagers to try to find rep. I did find a goatfolk inhabited non-goatfolk village, and though I could recruit the shaman, it was only level 15, and I don't feel like leveling them up. But perhaps I could level myself up? Certainly, if we level up just once, we'd have enough skill points to buy the skill. But alas, after I turned in all my books and Resha lore, the XP bar barely moved. Whilst there, I remembered that I could recruit Eshelstad if I could get a bit more Mechanimist rep, but I can't stand roaming the desert anymore. So instead, I decided to break the game wide open. There is one other way to get skill points. That is, of course, to drink warm static. Unlike pouring it on yourself, you retain your original body and level, but upon each consumption, the game will either transform your current skills or mutations into randomly chosen others. If it chooses mutations, you get a few mutation points. If it chooses skills, you get quite a few skill points. This might seem risky at first, and indeed for some late game builds it might change your character into something unplayable, though this could be debated. But for us, none of our mutations or skills were gained of our own choosing, save for the skills we learned through rep trade. We could lose proselytize or make camp, but we'd gain back enough points to buy them. But what we really want is mutations. We need a large amount of warm static. The first step is to farm some desalination pellets. I can do so from the Ichor merchant in our safe area, and also take a gigantic Crysteel dagger from Sixtru. I also need some dilute warm static, which is everywhere in the Moonstare, so I pop in and fill up a water skin. I do the next step back at the safe area to make sure no Girsh babies are around to complicate things. The process to convert dilute warm static into regular warm static is simple, but slow. First, pour 2 drams of fresh water onto the ground, which instantly becomes brackish water. Next, drop a desalination pellet into the puddle. This is more easily done whilst flying so you don't step into the puddle, otherwise I think you'd have to throw it. It should now turn into a single dram of pure water. Next, add 2 drams of dilute warm static to the water. This will make 3 drams of entropic water. And now, just wait. After a bit, the water will evaporate, leaving 1 dram of pure warm static, which can be collected. As far as I know, this process can't be scaled up with larger quantities, so I have to make 1 dram at a time. So I make 13 drams to start with, plus the one I got from the alchemist. Then I use polygel to duplicate water skins twice for a total of 56 drams. Should be way more than enough. I start drinking, and interestingly, we can't actually lose our multiple arms or a ritual beam. They're as innate as our Colossal status. We do, however, lose Quantum Fugue. That kind of sucks, but we do still have the temporal version granted by our relic. It's not quite as good, but still insane. And if you're curious, we roll through wings, but of course are still flying. It only takes 7 sips of static to get Beguiling, which eliminates the need for cooking and gathering. I decide to stop there, though I have to buy back a few skills. We also have a lot of mutation points now, so I spend them. I won't go over everything, but you can take a look here. We get some pretty good stuff. So now we can build the golem, right? Well, can I tell you something? I did all that warm static shenanigans to realize at the last second that I can just use Pax as the golem body. Having him as a follower completely solves the original issue I was having, as it eliminates the need for 2 followers. And if I only need 1 follower, I only need proselytize or beguile, but not both. If the golem body actually mattered, this would be an issue, but since I don't care, it's not. Oh well, at least we have some cool mutations to help with more potential future roadblocks, imagined or otherwise. Anyway, we now have 3 days to pass for the golem to be constructed, which should be just enough time to seek out our kin for a boss rush. The first few Girsh Nephilim are actually pretty easy to find. We pass through the Cloaca of Mistakes at the bottom of Golgotha and jump into the pit. As long as we just keep going down, either by falling into the pits or taking stairs, we eventually can find our first Girsh, Aggregat. So what happens when Girsh meets Girsh? Well, nothing really. It's friendly, of course. I could engage combat here, but I have a better idea. Instead, I befriend it, and I take it back to a secluded place on the surface. We'll be back later. I'm also able to return to the surface by dropping my recoiler, then stepping away and detonating the EMP grenade. It works perfectly. Next up is Bethsaida, who, much like Aggregat, resides deep below a previously visited dungeon. This time it's Bethesda Susa. Again, the Girsh dares not show aggression upon meeting its god, and we take it to join its kin on the surface. Our third Girsh is a little harder to find. Its lair spawns in a random Palladium reef tile. Palladium reef tiles have a higher chance to spawn lairs in general, but there are also no lore skills that lower the chances of getting lost, unlike almost every other tile on the map. The wings mutation passively reduces the chance of getting lost, but since we re-rolled into them, the level is now only 1, and while the tooltip says we still have a 40% reduced chance of getting lost, the level difference feels very noticeable. All this is to say, I'm getting lost a lot as I wander the reef tiles looking for this lair to pop up. I actually run out of water and have to make a pit stop in Yid Freehold to take Tilly's water, but I press on and eventually find the lair of Girsh Wormadon. Wormadon prefers the surface, and as such is located only 3 strata down, and as you may have guessed, we take this Girsh on a friendly stroll back to the others. So we're finding these Girsh lairs pretty quickly, huh? At this pace we'll be done in no time. Cass and Khan's lair spawn in a random moonstair tile. Like mountain tiles, moonstair tiles can't be passed through from the overworld, meaning we need to manually walk through every zone until we find it. There is a much faster way to find it, which involves trading secrets with the Java faction. However, as already established during our earlier testing, these individuals won't even speak to me. And while searching every zone of the Moonstair would be tedious but possible, more difficult is finding the lair of Shugruith. Like the twins, this lair spawns randomly but isn't limited to any specific biome. It could spawn in any tile on the entire map. Besides happening upon it randomly, which does happen occasionally in playthroughs, there are a few ways to make finding this lair easier as well. Much like the other, the location can be traded as a secret from a specific faction. This faction is the Gyrewites, a somewhat rare creature. You may have noticed these cool-looking Girsh shrines in the flower fields. Rarely there's a chance for a corresponding legendary Gyrewite to accompany them. I searched for almost 20 minutes only finding 1 shrine and no Gyrewites, and it wasn't even the shrine I needed. I'm not sure if, for example, a Gyrewite of Wormadon will share the location of Shugruith's lair, but even if it did, they're far too rare to make this a realistic option. The other way to find these lairs is actually a pretty fun one, but for us, of course, has some problems. If you can infect your limbs with Mumblmouth, one of the possible fungal infections from spore puffs, upon entering a new zone, there's a chance for the mouths to tell you a secret. One of these being the location of these lairs. The more limbs you infect, the more opportunities you have for secrets. Not only do we have plenty of limbs, but since we can't wear gear anyway, the negative effect of the infection wouldn't matter to us. The problem is actually getting infected. The Ehalkodon naturally blows away any gases that get near it, including clouds of spore puff spores. Even if we can get covered in spores, with our toughness so high, there's almost no chance it survives into the itchy skin phase, let alone a full-blown infection. My plan to solve all of these problems is to use domination. Didn't think we'd need any domination shenanigans for this run, but here we are. First we need to get the mutation. We still have a bunch of worm static left, which we can use to roll our mutations again, and since I spent all the mutation points we gained from the last worm static session, we now have a larger pool to roll through, meaning less static should be needed to get what we want. After only 5 sips, I don't have domination, but I have 35 mutation points, so I spend a few, hoping to increase my pool size to hasten the process, and end up seeing domination on my 3rd purchase. Next we need to find which spore puff gives Mumblmouth, as the 4 different types are randomized each playthrough. I recruit a low-level follower, dominate to make sure they get properly covered in spores, then head to a safe zone and wait for like 6,000 turns to see which of the fungal infections it evolves into. I get unlucky and have to test all of them, but eventually find out it's the Rose Puff which gives Mumblmouth. Now I recruit another low-level creature. It's important that they don't have a high toughness to not beat the itchy skin save. The Scorpiok works well, as they also have many limbs, so now I just use the same method I used to test the waters. Dominate, itchy skin, wait, repeat. It takes some time, and I even have to restock on water skins from 6 shrew just from waiting, but eventually, I now have a Scorpiok with every limb infected with Mumblmouth. So now all we have to do is wander the desert until we get the secret we want. Easy, right? Of course it can't be that simple. The Scorpiok isn't a very strong creature, so if we get into any danger, we have to end domination to teleport back to safety. This isn't too bad, but interestingly, when dominated, we inherit the psychic glimmer of the Ehalkodon. I think that Esper Hunter spawns are also influenced by level and mental mutations, so while the Ehalkodon was seeing Chrome Pyramid Hunters, the Scorpiok is seeing bats and humans. They can still be dangerous though. Sometimes you can juke enemies by traveling along the edge of a transitional zone to lose them, but not always. And either the grace period of enemies not noticing you when first entering a new area isn't working, or I'm losing a turn to Mumblmouth proccing, or something else I don't get. But at least Mumblmouth is proccing. I'm often getting up to 4 secrets per zone, but not the only one that matters. I'm also getting a lot of duplicate secrets. We also don't have a lot of turns of domination, so I never get more than a few parasangs away before having to return. And there's water management to deal with. And all of this wouldn't be so bad if it didn't take forever. I swear I've done this before on other playthroughs and it didn't take long at all. Here I still have nothing after almost an hour. I'm pretty sure it doesn't matter where you roam, as the secrets are completely random, though I did try to wander the marshes for a little bit in hopes that the regular enemy encounters would be a little easier to handle, but things went about the same. I even took a break and bought all of the lore skills and just roamed the overworld looking for the lair's pop-up, as it is unique and easily identifiable, but that too was an annoying failure, and it cost a lot of water, with 6 shrew being my only source. In the end, I just kept wandering, and eventually, after over an hour, I finally got the location of the lair. As it turns out, it's on a mountain tile, so the overworld tactic wouldn't have worked. Shugruth's lair works a little differently. You still have to follow pits down, but the further you go, you'll have to follow the purple walls, which will occasionally take you to adjacent tiles. I actually like this, but I think it goes on for a little bit too long. There are a lot of Esper hunters here, which are mostly annoying and only serve to slow me down. On the penultimate floor, there's a slight issue as I can't jump down the pit. I assume because Shugruth has created some of its walls where any valid landing spot would be, but thankfully I can just go one screen away, down some stairs, and go around to come in from the side. This one is a little more resistant to persuasion, but we are able to again recruit the Nephilim and bring it home. And with that, the last lair should be much easier to find, right? Well, I do have a plan. If I dominate a member of a faction they're friendly with, maybe the Chivok crystal things will talk to them, water bond, and tell me their secrets. First I talk to the Chiming Rock to learn the location of Chiva. I stock up on water and buy the tinkering skills needed to craft EMP grenades, which I'm starting to run low on. I head to the Stilt and recruit Eshelstadt, and take him all the way to the Tree of Life. They won't talk to him whilst dominated unless he's also not proselytized. Weird, but whatever. I talk to, waterbond, and trade secrets with all of them, and of course none tell me the location of the final lair. I don't have enough secrets to trade for the last 10 rep needed to have asked all of them for their secrets, but I doubt they'd tell me anyway. It's basically RNG what secrets you get, which hasn't been on my side for this run. At this point, I could go back to using the Scorpiok to find the last secret, but honestly, I think it'd be faster just to systematically search every zone in the Moonstair, so I do just that. You can kind of travel in a quick straight line if you walk along the right edge of these zones, and I have to imagine this is done on purpose. Most of the time I'm fine with the game's RNG, but for these last lairs, I wish there was a better way. This potentially could take a long time, but I get lucky deciding to start on the right side of the biome and find the lair not too long after. These are the twins, a packaged deal, and like Myrmidon are only 3 strata straight down. And since there are 2 of them and I can't make a programmable recoiler, I do have to make a second trip, but finally, after way more effort than I ever wanted to put into it, we finally rounded up all the Girsh Nephilim. So what now? I say we fight all of them at once. I first go around slapping each of them to get their aggro, but they actually start beaming and hitting each other with friendly fire. So I decide to see if I can kill them all without actually doing anything. I do have to smack them around a bit to get them to launch their beams, but yes, eventually they all die, except Myrmidon, which is actually a problem. My attacks don't do much damage to it, and as I'm flying, it won't stay put long enough for me to get good hits in. The fact that it has regeneration also doesn't help. I resort to using my Temporal Fugue, which for some reason now requires me to disable the local normality lattice with a self-detonated EMP grenade. Maybe Quantum Fugue didn't have this restriction? Anyway, it actually takes 2 rounds of fuging, in which I end up taking a ton of damage. It doesn't matter much for this run, but each Girsh has a special ability, such as extra health or resistances. When it dies, the next Girsh inherits that ability until the last one left has all of them. This also contributes to Myrmidon's resilience here. Being the final Girsh Nephilim, we already spawn with these abilities by default and don't gain any more here. Now, that was pretty fun, but I didn't actually see all the death notifications of every Girsh. Because of this, I reload a save and just take each one off and kill them one by recruiting them, then beating them to death. Not nearly as exciting, but we've already proved we can take them all on at the same time, and it would be a shame if the true boss didn't spawn because of some weirdness. Seeing the pop-up ensures they've died correctly. There's a few final things to do to prepare, because I want to plan for if things go horribly wrong. I thankfully only have to take 2 more sips of static, both proccing only skill changes and giving me more than enough points for what I need, without rolling any mutations. This gives me Tinker 3 and the Set Bombs ability, and I also farm Bep for a bit for the handy nuke data disk, so now I have the nuclear option if needed. I head back to Grit Gate, but have to leave and come back as I forgot to keep the chrome key after cleaning my inventory. Classic. My golem is now ready and immediately begins life by killing Pax. I like it already. Unfortunately, I'm too big to enter. That may be a problem later, but for now, I stuff Barathrum inside, park the golem outside the battlegrounds, and head in for the final fight. There are 4 Templars to defeat here, but I'm not expecting much of a challenge from them. After defeating the first, I'm very happy to see this pop up. That means the Ihaukodon has correctly spawned in. I go ahead and clean up the others first. Not being able to land makes these fights slightly annoying, as grounded enemies always tend to try to stay 1 tile away. The only time this is a big problem is for the mecha. It just has a ridiculous amount of HP and defense, so I Temporal Fugue to end it quickly. Which brings us finally to the ultimate battle. Now, we may have some more mutations, but our stats are about the same. Any passive mutations we have that influence stats are at their lowest possible level, and I'm purposefully avoiding using any other active combat mutations. So, let's go. Ihaukodon versus Ihaukodon. Or, well, never mind. Even though we got the pop-up, it didn't spawn. Now, there was an update to the game right before I went into battle, and a few things were acting weird, but my guess is that because we've already spawned one in at the start, the game refuses to spawn another. Trust me, I looked around, did some debugging, the Girsh is just not there, and I can't make it spawn. Oh well, I've put far too much into this run to be stopped here, so let's use another wish and pretend that it spawned naturally, like it should have. To be fair, this wish wouldn't have been required to beat the game had I not killed all of the other Nephilim first. From testing, another random Nephilim would have spawned as normal, but since you're required to kill the otherwise random Girsh to progress, and the Ihaukodon won't spawn here, it now is required. We start the totally legitimately spawned in Girsh fight immediately by going straight for Temporal Fugue, and it's pure chaos. The Girsh responds with its own Quantum Fugue, and every clone starts firing Iristual beams. I don't even know what's happening. After literally 2 minutes of beams firing and screen shake, everything else is gone, including the other Girsh. I assume it died from friendly fire as there is supposed to be a pop-up, but with all the other weirdness of this run, who knows? And of course, the quest doesn't progress. I suppose I could reload and try to make sure I get the kill myself and not from friendly fire. That seems rather difficult for the same reasons Wormadon was hard to kill. And the fight was cool. I don't want to invalidate it by rewriting history with a backup save. So, what can I do from here? Well, I did some testing, even going as far as swapping into another creature and killing my original Girsh body to see if that would satisfy the quest requirements. That didn't work. Instead, something incredibly interesting happened when I used the wish to complete the quest step of killing the Girsh. I die. I can only guess this is something in the code as a precaution so that the Girsh that spawns during reclamation is permanently deleted, so you don't see it at its natural home later if you haven't killed it already? Or something? At the instant of death, the game makes a checkpoint save as well. Even exiting without saving instantly kills me upon loading, so I'm soft-locked. Thankfully, I was able to reload my backup saves, or the run would have ended here. My backup save was right after I'd killed the Girsh, so I'm given another chance at testing things. My next idea works well. I dominate one of my Girshlings, then use the wish. Then I simply end domination. Almost too easy. Next, all we have to do is ascend. This run really has just been one inconvenience after another, and I just want it to end. Surely there will be no more issues, right? This time I actually pour the warm static onto myself. We turn into a schematics drafter. That's fine. Now we're not too big to enter the golem. I don't hesitate. Into the golem, into the ribbon, straight to the starship. Finally, after all that, it's over. Stardust returns to the stars. What a run. Before starting, I thought it would be just a breeze through speedrun. Boy was I surprised. While there was very little combat challenge, this really pushed my game knowledge to the limit. The start was a little slow. As I said, I was still thinking in terms of normal runs at the beginning. I certainly didn't think I'd end up abusing warm static for this one, or any of the other crazy tactics I had to come up with. The wishes were kind of unfortunate, but again, technically only one is necessary to beat the game. I wasn't expecting the spawning weirdness during the reclamation fight, but obviously you were never meant to play this way. I may have understated just how annoying it was to deal with the egg sacs and Girshlings. That, plus being progression locked behind RNG, makes it hard for me to recommend this run. As always, it was fun coming up with ideas to solve these unique challenges, but when the execution becomes tedious, it really drags down the fun. Part of the reason runs like these take me so long, it's not very motivating when you know you need to grind the same thing for a few hours. But now I know, being the strongest creature in all of CUD, not really all it's cracked up to be. Thanks for watching. Live and drink.